Hello everyone. So it's been some time since I last made a Chronicle video. So I'm going to pick up where we left off last time. And this time it won't be quite as acutely ear to ear. I think this may work out a little better. So this is where we left off at the fall of the Black Empire. The victories over the Aqir and the Elementals heartened the Keepers, but they knew that their greatest battles were still to come. As one, they turned their righteous gaze on the heart of the Black Empire, the sprawling temple city built around the old god 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗪. By toppling the most powerful 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗶𝗹 bastion on Azeroth, the Keepers believed they could crush their enemies in one swift stroke. The Keepers and their allies waded through one storm of 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗶 after another as they battled their way toward the mountainous form of 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗪. The broken and mangled bodies of Titan-Forged and 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗃 alike riddled the landscape by the time the invaders breached the city and assaulted the old god itself. 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗪 was more powerful than the Keepers had expected. It poisoned the minds of the Titan-Forged, drawing out their fears and darkening their thoughts. The Pantheon grew concerned that the old god would overwhelm their servants. Despite the risk of harming the world, they decided to take direct action. 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗶𝗃 himself reached down through Azeroth's stormy skies and took hold of 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗪's writhing body. With a heave of his mighty arm, he tore the old god from the crust of the world. In that moment, 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗪's gargantuan build was ripped apart. The immensity of the old god's death rattle shattered mountaintops and obliterated hundreds of Titan-Forged where they stood. 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗪 was dead, but its tendrils had bored more deeply through Azeroth than 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗃 had ever imagined. In excising the old god from the world, he had inadvertently ripped an eternal wound in Azeroth's surface. Volatile arcane energies, the lifeblood of the nascent Titan, erupted from the scar and roiled out across the world. Horrified by this turn of events, the Pantheon realized they could not risk killing the old gods in such a manner. The malignant creatures had embedded themselves so deep into the world that tearing them out would destroy Azeroth itself. The Pantheon knew that the only course of action was to imprison the old gods where they lay and contain their evil forever. It would be a difficult task, but it would be possible with the aid of the Keepers. At the Pantheon's behest, the Titan-Forged devised a plan to shatter the last vestiges of the Black Empire forever. They would battle each of the old gods directly. Once they had weakened the creatures, Arcadis would create subterranean chambers to contain them. Mimiron would then fashion colossal machineries to lock the old gods in place. When this work was done, Loken would imbue each prison with great enchantment that would neutralize the old god's evil. With their plans formed, the Titan-Forged began their campaign. Great battles tore across the land as the Titan-Forged fought their way southeast to the bastion of 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗃. After overwhelming the old god, the Keepers used their powers to encase the creature in an underground prison. Next, the Titan-Forged marched southwest to the sprawling temple city that had grown around the third old god, Cthulhu. The Keepers and their allies purged the swarms of 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗃 before assaulting the old god itself and subduing it. Much as they had done with 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗃, the Keepers entombed the entity beneath the earth and constructed a prison of their own devising over its form. Only one old god remained, the vicious and cunning 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗃. It would not fall so easily. As the Titan-Forged closed in on 𝗦𝘂𝗫𝗃's crumbling northern stronghold, the old god unleashed the greatest of its generals, the 𝗦𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 creatures, larger and more resilient than the other 𝗦𝘂𝗍𝗃. They possess great strength and brutal intellect, and their dark powers and maledictions could drive even the Titan Forged to madness. The giant tentacle-faced 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗏 whipped the remnants of the Black Empire into a frenzy. They swarmed the Titan Forge on all sides, thinning their ranks. By the time the Keepers and their allies reached 𝗦𝘂𝗻, their forces were greatly diminished. They found that they lacked the strength of numbers to defeat the old god. 𝗦𝘂𝗻 would have destroyed the Titan Forge completely, if not for the heroic efforts of Odin. Although scarred and battered by war, Odin summoned his waning strength and inspired the Titan Forge to launch a counterattack. He commanded Loken to weave a grand illusion spell that forced the 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗏𝗃 to see themselves and even 𝗦𝘂𝗻 as the enemy. As the Black Empire's forces turned on one another, Odin swooped in to cut down his confused foes. The other Titan Forged followed his lead, and together they succeeded in pacifying 𝗦𝘂𝗻. As they had done with Cthulhu and Azoth, the Keepers buried the entity beneath the earth, locking it away in a monolithic, enchanted prison. The Well of Eternity and the World Forges. For the first time in Azeroth's history, a tentative peace settled over the world. The Titan Forged had banished the chaotic elemental lords to another plane of existence. They had also purged the Black Empire and muted the terrible power of the old gods. Against all odds, Azeroth had been saved. But there was much work to be done. The Keeper's most pressing concern was the horrific scar left behind when Aman'Thul had torn Y'Shaarj from the world's crust. A constant stream of volatile arcane energy bled from the colossal rift, lashing out across the world. The Keepers knew that, if left unattended, these energies would consume Azeroth over time. The Keepers labored day and night, crafting magic wards around the gaping wound to stanch the escaping lifeblood. Eventually, the tumultuous energies calmed and settled into balance. All that remained of the scar was an immense lake of scintillating energy that the Keepers would call the Well of Eternity. Thereafter, the power of this wondrous font would be infused in the ailing world, helping life to take root and bloom across the globe. With the wound healed, the Keepers sought to strengthen Azeroth's nascent world soul and stabilize its life force. To do so, Arcadis and Mimiron combined their powers to craft the Forge of Wills and the Forge of Origination. These two extraordinary machines would work in tandem, infusing Azeroth's slumbering spirit with cosmic energies. The Force of Wills would be embedded in the northern reaches of the world, and it would shape the world soul's budding sentience. The Forge of Origination would be installed in the southern reaches of Azeroth, and it would regulate the rhythms of the deep earth and fortify the world soul's form. After these two machines were constructed, the Keepers went to work. Odin oversaw efforts to install the Forge of Wills within a vast northern mountain range that would become known as the Storm Peaks. The Pantheon appointed Odin the prime designate for his valorous deeds in the war with the old gods. The task of watching over 𝗦𝘂𝗻's prison and maintaining the Forge of Wills would fall to him. Odin and the other Keepers immediately began building the great fortress of Ulduar to serve as the main bastion of the Titan Forged on Azeroth. The fortress would house not only 𝗦𝘂𝗻's prison, but also the Forge of Wills and other machineries of the Keepers' devising. The Forge of Wills would also serve another purpose. It could draw on the life essence of Azeroth itself, giving shape and sentience to creatures of living stone and metal, not only giants, but other types of Titan Forged as well. This new generation of Titan Forged would help the Keepers bring order to the world. As the Forge of Wills churned out these new Titan Forged, High Keeper Ra led an expedition to install the Forge of Origination in the south. He was accompanied by a number of stone-skinned creatures recently wrought from the Forge of Wills, the 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍 giants, the leonine 𝗪𝗏, and the indomitable 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗽. En route, Ra discovered that the remnants of Y'Shaaraj's corporeal form lay strewn across the southern reaches of the world. When Aman'Thul had ripped the old god from Azeroth, pieces of the entity had fallen back to the surface, infusing the land with evil. The largest intact pieces of Y'Shaaraj was the old god's icy heart, a mass of diseased flesh seething with void energies. Rather than destroy the heart, Ra built a subterranean vault to contain it and neutralize its evil. He, along with the other keepers, knew that studying the heart could help them understand the nature of the old gods and the other void creatures. Ra charged his 𝗦𝘂𝗽 followers with watching over the vault of Y'Shaaraj. They would guard and care for the surrounding land as well. Ra then continued his expedition and traveled west. There, he and his followers embedded the Forge of Origination in the land. The earth rumbled beneath Ra's feet as the gargantuan machine churned to life. The High Keeper soon sensed that the twin forges were working in synergy, sending healing energies through the heart of the world. Ra and his followers erected a sprawling fortress around the Forge of Origination. This site was called Uldum, and it would become the southernmost base of operations for the Keepers. Much like the Forge of Wills, the Forge of Origination would serve a dual purpose. In the event that Azeroth's flora and fauna succumb to corruption, the incredible energy stored inside the Great Machine could be unleashed to eradicate all life on the world, allowing it to start anew. High Keeper Ra commanded some of the 𝗪𝗏 and 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍 to safeguard Uldum forever. He and the rest of his servants marched northwest into a land later known as Silithus. This arid and inhospitable region was home to the subterranean prison that housed the old god Cthulhu. Ra and his allies labored to expand on the prison, ultimately constructing the mighty fortress of Ahn'Qiraj. After the task was done, the High Keeper ordered his remaining Titan Forge to safeguard the stronghold. Ra himself, seeing his work completed, would spend the following ages roaming the southern regions of Azeroth, distantly observing his Titan Forged and ensuring that they upheld their sacred charges. The Ordering of Azeroth. With the twin forges embedded in Azeroth, the Keepers moved to reshape the surface of the world. To this end, they called on a new generation of servants wrought from the Forge of Wills. Each of these loyal and mighty Titan Forged would play a different role in ordering and protecting the world. The craggy, kind-hearted Earthen would specialize in crafting mountains and carving out the deep places of the world. The clockwork mechanomes, designed by Keeper Mimiron, would help build and maintain the Keeper's extraordinary machineries. The stone-skinned 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍 would dig out the myriad rivers and waterways of Azeroth. The task of safeguarding many of the Keeper's holdings would fall to two different groups of constructs, the iron-skinned 𝗦𝘂𝗽 and the chiseled 𝗪𝗏. To shape the environment, the Keepers also conscripted the powerful stone and sea giants. They would roam the breadth of Azeroth, lifting towering mountain ranges and dredging out the fathomless seas. As the Titan Forged began shaping Azeroth, Keeper Freya set out to populate the world with organic life. To do so, she crafted the Emerald Dream, a vast and ever-shifting dimension of spirits and nature magic. This ethereal plane, acted as a mirror image of Azeroth, helping regulate the evolutionary path of the world's flora and fauna. A confluence of spirits and strange otherworldly beings populated the dream, frolicking in the surreal paradise that was their home. The mystical dream defied mortal perceptions of reality. Concepts like time and distance held no sway within this realm of intangibles. A day on the physical world could feel like decades in the dream. Freya then wandered the world, searching for areas where the Well of Eternity's energies had coalesced. These regions created optimal conditions for the development of new flora and fauna. Freya shaped the immense enclaves of nature at these places of power. She molded a life of astounding diversity, seeding it around the world. The sites where Freya had done her work were located at the polar extremes of the world. They included regions that would later become known as 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗽 crater, 𝗦𝘂𝗪 basin, and the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. The greatest creatures to emerge from these enclaves were colossal animals known as the wild gods. Freya adored and cared for these majestic beings as if they were her very own children. She often wandered the physical world with the wild gods at her side, vibrant forests and grasslands blooming in their footsteps. Yet there was one place that she and the old gods frequented more than any other, a massive forested peak called 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗽𝗃, the dreaming world. Some believe that Freya wove the Emerald Dream into being from nothing. Others claim that this strange place had always existed in some form, a dream born from Azeroth's slumbering world soul. It is said that Freya tapped into this realm and molded what would become known as the Emerald Dream as a way to commune with the nascent Titan. Here we have a list of the wild gods. It says, among the greatest wild gods were Malorn, the honorable white stag, Aesina, the mother wisp, Agamagon, the razor boar, Aviana, the mistress of birds, Ursok and Ursol, the colossal bear lords, Tortola, the wise, Goldrin, the great wolf, Chaifi, the red crane, Nizau, the black ox, Zuen, the white tiger, and Yulan, the jade serpent. It was on the slopes of Hyjal that Freya bound the spirits of her beloved wild gods to the Emerald Dream. Inexorably tied to the ethereal realm, they would come to symbolize the health and vitality of Azeroth itself. Forever after, Hyjal would remain a refuge and sacred place to the wild gods. As Freya's creations explored the world, they came across a number of other strange life forms. These creatures had emerged from Azeroth's elemental past of their own free will. When the Keepers had sealed off the elemental plane, some stragglers had escaped banishment. The fury of these spirits had ebbed over time, and they had become creatures of flesh and blood. It was from these former elements that some forms of wildlife, such as proto-dragons, came to be. In time, the Keepers and their servants stabilized Azeroth's main landmass, a continent that teemed with plants and creatures of every kind. Twilight fell as the Titan Forge surveyed the world they had shaped, and they named the primary continent Kalimdor, Land of Eternal Starlight. The Pillars of Creation. The Pantheon bestowed wondrous artifacts on the Keepers to aid them with ordering the world. These relics were known as the Pillars of Creation. Ages after the Keepers had completed their grand work, the artifacts would become lost and scattered across the lands of Azeroth. Here we have an image of giants shaping the lands and seas of Azeroth. The Pantheon's departure. Pleased with the Keeper's efforts and assured that the slumbering world soul was in good hands, the Pantheon prepared to venture back into the Great Dark. The discovery of Azeroth was proof that other nascent titans could exist in the universe, and the titans were eager to renew their search. The Keepers mourned the imminent departure of their makers, but they also brimmed with pride at being given the honor of safeguarding Azeroth. To commemorate the Pantheon's departure, Loken and Memoron crafted a set of enchanted artifacts called the Discs of Norgannon, which would transcribe history as it unfolded on Azeroth. If ever the Pantheon returned, they would possess a record of what had come to pass in their absence. In his final act before departing, 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗽 commissioned the constellar Algalon the Observer to serve as the world's celestial guardian. The possibility that the world's soul could become corrupted was one the Titans could not ignore. Should that come to pass, Algalon had the power to initiate a procedure that would activate the Forge of Origination, purging the world of life and any corruption that was present. With that, the Pantheon bade the Titan Forged farewell and disappeared into the stars. The Titans had done everything possible to heal Azeroth and assure the world soul's maturation. All that remained now was to wait and hope that the world soul would one day awaken. Galakrond. In the ages after the Pantheon left Azeroth, myriad life forms flourished across the surface of the world. The most savage and cunning were the proto-dragons, who dwelled in the frozen north of Kalimdor. The various proto-dragon species had a wide array of strengths and abilities. Some were gigantic winged beasts of incredible fortitude, their spirits tied to the world itself. Others had unknowingly tapped into the latent elemental energies that permeated the newly ordered world. But there was one proto-dragon whose brutality and devastating power overshadowed the rest of his kind. His name was Galakrond, and he was the largest proto-dragon who had ever soared across Azeroth's skies. So mighty was the enormous creature that the beating of his wings could flatten entire forests. Strength, however, was not his only weapon. He possessed a preternatural cunning that made him an exceptional hunter. In time, Galakrond came to dominate the most sought-after hunting grounds in northern Kalimdor. Compelled by an insatiable hunger, he devoured everything in sight. His body swelled to an even greater size, yet nothing could ever sate his cravings. So terrible was his hunger that Galakrond began feasting on other proto-dragons, even the corpses of the dead. Devouring fallen proto-dragons eventually warped Galakrond's mind and body with a necrotic affliction. Misshapen limbs and dozens of eyes sprouted across his gargantuan form. Death energies wafted off of Galakrond's jagged hide, reanimating dead matter. These necrotic powers were infused in Galakrond's victims, and they rose from the dead as mindless abominations. The ranks of Galakrond's wretched minions expanded. Soon, he and his ruined followers terrorized the skies over Kalimdor. The other proto-dragons, fractured by long-standing rivalries, failed to unite against this new threat. Tyr, the mightiest of the Keepers, was the first of his kind to notice the danger posed by Galakrond. He warned his fellow Keepers of what he had seen, but he could not motivate them to act. Though the Keepers had once sworn to protect the world, the war with the old gods and the ordering of Azeroth had sapped their collective strength and willpower. They had become indifferent to the world at large, focused solely on maintaining their vaults and arcane machineries. But Tyr was not deterred by his siblings' apathy. His drive to seek justice and order in the world pushed him forward. Tyr knew that if Galakrond remained unchecked, he would devour all nature, spreading his affliction to the far corners of Azeroth. Thus, the Keeper sought a means to destroy the giant proto-dragon and his minions. Tyr found his answer with 5 of the greatest and most intelligent proto-dragons in existence: Alexstrasza, Neltharion, Malygos, Ysera, and Nosdormu. Nearly all of these creatures hailed from different strains, and each of them displayed unique powers. Even the 2 sisters, Alexstrasza and Ysera, commanded distinct abilities. The tenacious and kind-hearted Alexstrasza could summon gouts of fire from her maw. The mighty Neltharion possessed incredible strength, and his piercing roar could shatter bone and rock alike. The cunning Malygos could breathe frost, encasing his foes in solid ice. The wise Nosdormu could assail his enemies with blinding storms of coarse sand. The elusive Ysera's breath could debilitate her enemies, sapping their willpower and throwing them into a deep trance. Tyr beseeched the 5 proto-dragons for aid in thwarting Galakrond. The creatures were initially suspicious of the strange being who had approached them, but they soon vowed to fight by his side. Despite their differences, the 5 proto-dragons showed a surprising willingness to work as one. Under Tyr's guidance, Alexstrasza and her companions warred with Galakrond and his feated minions. Their battles raged over the snowy peaks and rocky spires of northern Kalimdor. Initially, Galakrond's jagged hide warded off the attacks of the 5 proto-dragons. Though disheartened by their enemy's resilience, Alexstrasza and her allies soon found his weakness. They assaulted Galakrond's many eyes and his soft, vulnerable gullet. By using their powers in harmony and trusting in one another, the 5 proto-dragons vanquished their gargantuan foe. Galakrond's lifeless husk plummeted to the ground, smashing into the frozen tundra of what would become known as the Dragonblight. The 5 proto-dragons had won despite all odds, but they had only done so by working together. It was a lesson they would not soon forget. Alexstrasza and the others would carry on this ideal of unity and cooperation for ages to come. Tyr and the Silver Hand. Tyr fought alongside the proto-dragons, but Galakrond proved too powerful even for the Keeper of Justice. In one particular battle, the monstrous creature bit off Tyr's iron hand, suffusing him with necrotic energy. Although Tyr survived, his wound would never truly heal. Many years later, Tyr would replace his lost hand with one forged of pure silver. This silver hand would come to symbolize his belief that only through personal sacrifice could one achieve lasting justice. On the next page, we have a map of Azeroth after it was ordered. So here we have Mount 𝗦𝗂𝗽𝗪, Sholazar Basin, here's Ulduar, Wyrmrest Temple, the Well of Eternity right in the center, Un'Goro Crater, here's where Cthulhu is, Uldum, the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, N'Zoth, and Uldaman. Charge of the Dragonflights. While Tyr and the proto-dragons were battling Galakrond, the other keepers finally emerged from their stupor. Too late, they realized the threat that the corrupted monstrosity posed. They were heartened by the resolve of Tyr's winged allies and ashamed of their own apathy. Tyr, however, never chastised the other keepers. Instead, he convinced them to imbue the 5 proto-dragons with powers so that they could safeguard the lands of Azeroth. Only Keeper Odin challenged this idea. Though he acknowledged the proto-dragon's heroism, he did not agree that Azeroth's fate should be placed on their shoulders. Odin saw Alexstrasza and her ilk as primitive life forms. Only the mighty Titan Forged could be trusted to protect the world. Odin argued that as Prime Designate, he had the final decision on how to proceed. Yet Tyr and the other keepers disagreed. Through bravery and self-sacrifice, the proto-dragons had earned the right to act as Azeroth's guardians. Despite Odin's continued protests, the other keepers moved forward with their plans. After the proto-dragons defeated Galakrond, the keepers journeyed to frozen tundra, where the final battle had taken place. Even Ra traveled from the distant south to take part in the great ceremony that was to come. Acting as conduits of their creator's power, the gathered keepers bestowed the blessings of the Pantheon upon each proto-dragon. High Keeper Ra channeled the powers of his creator, 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗽, into the proto-dragon 𝗦𝘂𝗪. Of all of 𝗦𝘂𝗽's myriad powers, 𝗦𝘂𝗪 was blessed with a mastery of time itself. 𝗦𝘂𝗪 became known as the Timeless One, and he held dominion over interweaving pathways of fate and destiny. The nurturing and ever-merciful Freya called upon her creator, 𝗦𝘂𝗪, to empower the proto-dragon 𝗦𝗪𝗪. Known thereafter as the Life-Binder, 𝗦𝗪𝗪 would devote everything she was to the stewardship of the living world. Having proved her courage and compassion in the battles against Galakrond, she was crowned the Dragon Queen and given command over her kind. Freya also beseeched 𝗦𝘂𝗪 to bless 𝗦𝗪𝗪's younger sister, the proto-dragon 𝗦𝘂𝗪, with nature's influence. 𝗦𝘂𝗪 was charged with keeping watch over the flowering wilds of Azeroth from within the Emerald Dream. Bound to the ethereal realm, she descended into an endless trance and became known thereafter as the Dreamer. Keeper Loken called on his creator 𝗏𝗏𝗏 to endow the proto-dragon 𝗦𝗏𝗏s with incredible arcane powers. Henceforth, 𝗦𝗏𝗏s would be known as the Spellweaver. The limitless realms of magic and hidden arcana would be his to share, explore, and protect. Lastly, Keeper Arcadis asked his creator, Khaz'goroth, to bestow some of his vast power upon the indomitable proto-dragon 𝗦𝘪ion. Known afterward as the Earth Warder, 𝗦𝘪ion was given charge over the mountains and deep caverns of the earth. He embodied the strength of the world and served for many ages as 𝗦𝗪𝗪's greatest friend and confidant. Bristling with the Pantheon's energies, the 5 proto-dragons transformed into immense and graceful creatures. 𝗦𝘪𝗪's hide took on a bronze hue like a sea of shimmering golden sand. 𝗦𝗪𝗪's scale turned a deep and vivid shade of red. 𝗦𝘪𝗪's life form became a vibrant green to reflect her new connection with nature. Malygos turned an icy blue color, and his very scales radiated potent arcane energies. 𝗦𝘪ion's rough hide became an earthy black. From that day forward, these 5 extraordinary beings would become known as the Dragon Aspects. The Keepers also sought to create new species to help the Dragon Aspects protect the world. These beings would serve the Aspects as consorts and allies. To this end, the Keepers magically altered hundreds of proto-dragon eggs. From them would emerge creatures born in the image of the Aspects. This new race, known as dragons, would form 5 distinct flights: bronze, red, green, blue, and black. Though each of these flights would serve a different dragon aspect, they would all be bound by their duty to protect Azeroth. To strengthen this bond, the Keepers forged a grand tower in northern Kalimdor called Wormreth Temple. It would serve as the heart of the dragon's culture, a sanctuary where they could gather and discuss their activities. But above all, Wormrest would stand as a symbol of their unity. The Keepers, satisfied with their work, disappeared back inside their lairs, leaving the Aspects to watch over the living creatures of Azeroth. Odin and the raising of the Halls of Valor. As the other keepers were conducting their ceremony to empower the dragon aspects, Odin brooded within the halls of 𝗦𝘂𝗪. He was furious that his allies had acted against his wishes, the wishes of the Prime Designate. More than that, Odin believed with all his heart that the dragon aspects would fail in their charge to safeguard the world. For the good of Azeroth, Odin decided to take matters into his own hands. He would create an elite army of his design, one that he could call on to protect the world should the need ever arise. To fill the ranks of this fighting force, Odin would look to the mighty 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍. He had always admired their innate courage and strength. He saw the 𝗦𝘂𝗽, above all other Titanforged, as the perfect expression of the warrior spirit. Upon returning to 𝗦𝘂𝗪, Tyr and the other keepers demanded that Odin abandon his foolish plans, yet their words had no effect on the Prime Designate. Odin was single-minded in his focus and unbending in these ideas of what was right. He invited the other keepers to help him create his army. While none stepped forward to join his cause, Odin announced that he would pursue his quest without them. Odin secured one of 𝗦𝘂𝗪's wings to act as the base for his new army. To permanently separate it from the rest of the fortress and from the other keepers, he called on the Titanforged sorceress 𝗦𝘂𝗪. Over the ages, Odin had come to see her as his adopted daughter. 𝗦𝘂𝗪 wove a great spell to encase the keeper's stronghold. Then, focusing all of her power, she ripped the colossal chunk of 𝗦𝘂𝗪 from the earth and lifted it into the cloudy skies. In time, this floating citadel would become known as the Halls of Valor. From atop his fortress, Odin bestowed out a proclamation to all 𝗦𝘂𝗽. Those who proved their bravery by dying glorious deaths in battle would live again in the Halls of Valor. Their spirits would be transported to the fortress and given mighty, new storm-forged bodies. These champions, these 𝗦𝘂𝗪, would serve as Azeroth's foremost guardians. Their deeds would live on in the hearts of all Titanforged forever after. All that remained was to find a means of ferrying the spirits of the dead into the Halls of Valor. For this, Odin studied the energies that permeated the Shadowlands. The knowledge he gained would allow him to transform some of the 𝗦𝘂𝗽 into spectral beings known as Valkyr. These wraith-like servants would travel between the Shadowlands and the physical world, guiding souls of worthy 𝗦𝘂𝗽 to the Halls of Valor. Yet those who became Valkyr would be cursed to live as phantom beings for all eternity. No 𝗦𝘂𝗽 volunteered for the grim task of becoming a Valkyr, and thus Odin decided he would create his servants by force. 𝗦𝘂𝗪 admonished the keeper for his willingness to turn Titanforge into slaves against their will. The argument between her and Odin grew so heated that the two nearly came to blows. In the end, 𝗦𝘂𝗪 warned that she would return the Halls of Valor to 𝗦𝘂𝗪 if Odin did not change his mind. Odin saw 𝗦𝘂𝗪's disobedience as a threat not only to his plans, but to the future safety of Azeroth itself. Blinded by his dreams of what the Halls of Valor could become, he struck out at the sorceress. Odin shattered her physical form and twisted her spirit into the first of the Valkyr. 𝗦𝘂𝗪's howls of pain and anger rumbled across the surface of Azeroth and pierced into the very heart of the Shadowlands. This violent transformation would forever darken 𝗦𝘂𝗪, but her torment was not finished. Though she loathed Odin for what he had done to her, she found herself compelled to obey his will. Under Odin's command, she set out to transform unwilling 𝗦𝘂𝗽 into the cursed Valkyr. For ages, 𝗦𝘂𝗪 and her fellow Valkyr brought the souls of heroic 𝗦𝘂𝗽 to the Halls of Valor. The citadel became filled with storm-infused 𝗦𝘂𝗪. Odin trained and empowered each of these warriors. He had no remorse for breaking from the keepers or for transforming 𝗦𝘂𝗪 into the first Valkyr. In Odin's mind, everything he had done was for the safety of Azeroth and in honor of the great Pantheon. Sargeras and the betrayal. The Keepers went about their duties on Azeroth, unaware of a new threat that was taking shape in the distant reaches of the Great Dark. Sargeras, having broken all ties with the Pantheon, meditated on the fate of the universe in isolation. His fear that the Void Lords had already corrupted other world souls consumed him. As doubt and despair continued twisting the Titan's every thought, he became more certain than ever that the creation itself was fatally flawed. Finally, he concluded that the only way to spare the universe was to purge it in fire. Thus, his grand burning crusade would begin. To accomplish this burning crusade, Sargeras required a vast force of unquenchable rage. He knew of only one place that held such power and potential: Martyrdom, the plane of banishment. Over the ages, the prison had become bloated with fell magic and vengeful demons. Their presence had warped Martyrdom, transforming it into a realm of a nightmare. Torrents of fell energy ceaselessly bombarded the prison's wall, bathing the captive demons in a roiling sea of volatile magic. Sargeras quelled his remaining apprehension and tore the prison asunder, spilling its wrathful denizens into the great dark beyond. The subsequent explosion of fell magic was powerful beyond even what the fallen Titan had imagined. Violent energies enveloped Sargeras, surging through his veins and searing his very soul. His eyes burst in gouts of emerald fire. Fell volcanoes ignited across his once noble form, splitting his skin apart and revealing an endless furnace of blistering hate. Yet despite these horrific physical changes, Sargeras' mind remained locked on his one all-consuming purpose: to prevent the Void Lords from possessing creation. Life itself had to be extinguished. In shattering the prison, Sargeras had ruptured the boundary between the Great Dark and the Twisting Nether. A monstrous celestial maw, limbed in a storm of emerald fire, had ripped through the fabric of reality. It would remain a scar on creation, smoldering proof of Sargeras' madness for all eternity. Demons of every shape and size poured into the physical universe from this rift, howling in triumph at their release. Sargeras imbued the ravenous masses with his power, uniting them as one in an inferno of fell magic. Though many demons had previously tapped into the volatile energies of the Nether, none had ever experienced the pure might and rage found in Sargeras' fell. Some of the creatures grew in size and stature, still others felt new cunning and intelligence unfold in their minds. By this point, Sargeras had learned more about the nature of demons, including how to permanently destroy their spirits. He offered a simple pact in exchange for the demon's newfound power: fight at his command or be extinguished. It was not a difficult choice. To thwart the Void Lords, Sargeras unleashed his new army, his Burning Legion, upon the innumerable worlds of the Great Dark. Never before had the forces of evil been united in such numbers. Sargeras wielded enough power to make disobedience all but unthinkable. None would dream of challenging him, but more importantly, his minions grew to delight in their role as agents of extinction. The Burning Legion fell upon its first world. Though it did not contain a slumbering Titan, it was a world that had been ordered by the Pantheon in ages past. Sargeras' forces incinerated the mortal civilizations that dwelled there, wiping out dozens of sentient species. When the Constellar, whom the Pantheon had charged to oversee the world, arrived, Sargeras himself annihilated the celestial being. Agramar was the first to learn of the Constellar's demise. As more news of the Burning Legion's atrocities reached him, he hunted down the demonic army. Agramar arrived just in time to witness the Legion scouring yet another world, and he saw the twisted, fire-wreathed breathing leading it, his mentor and greatest friend, Sargeras. Agramar was stunned. He demanded an explanation from Sargeras. The former champion offered none, only declaring that his burning crusade was the sole means to purify the universe. Anyone who stood against him, Sargeras added, would burn in the fires of his legion as well. Knowing that he could not sway Sargeras with words, Agramar challenged his former mentor to single combat. Before the watching eyes of the demon masses, the two greatest warriors the universe had ever known came to blows. Agramar soon found himself outmatched. Like all titans, he was uniquely susceptible to fell magic. Sargeras' ferocious assaults shattered Agramar's defenses and sent him reeling in agony. In a final desperate counterattack, Agramar summoned all the power at his command and struck at Sargeras. Their two blades met, igniting a furious explosion of fell and arcane power. When the torrent of warring energies finally subsided, Sargeras and Agramar saw that both of their weapons had been shattered. Heavily wounded by the blast, Agramar retreated from battle and returned to the rest of the Pantheon. Disbelief gripped the other titans as they learned what had happened. The thought of their most trusted and noble warrior falling to darkness shook their faith to the core. The Pantheon could not fathom how to stop such a threat, yet they believed they could not sit idly by. Girded for war, the combined might of the Pantheon confronted Sargeras and his unholy legion near a world named 𝗦𝘂𝗦𝗪. 𝗦𝘂𝗫 called out to Sargeras, pleading with him to abandon his mad burning crusade. He told Sargeras of Azeroth, a fledgling world soul with more potential than any of the Pantheon had ever seen, a being strong enough to defeat the Void Lords in due time. Sargeras listened carefully, but was unmoved. Despite his earlier battle with Sargeras, Agramar believed that something noble still lingered deep in the former champion's heart. As a last resort, he laid down his arms and approached the fallen titan. Agramar recounted tales of their glorious battles against demons, reminding Sargeras of the sacred oaths they had sworn to protect creation. But Sargeras was set in his ways. Nothing the Pantheon could say, nothing even his cherished protege could say, would ever change his mind. With a howl of rage and sorrow, Sargeras struck Agramar down, his ruined fell blade nearly cleaving the titan in two. Infuriated by this unthinkable murder, the Pantheon launched an all-out assault on Sargeras and his burning legion. Stars withered and died as the battle raged across the cosmos, scarring vast stretches of reality. 𝗦𝘂𝗪, known thereafter as the Doom World, became warped and twisted by the apocalyptic conflict. The titans of the Pantheon wielded powers incomprehensible to mortal minds, yet even they could not overcome Sargeras' fell-fueled might. The fallen titan decimated the Pantheon members with fell fire until he had broken their will to fight. To seal their demise, Sargeras summoned a massive fell storm that would consume their bodies and souls alike. Yet just as the furious onslaught of energy washed over the defeated titans, 𝗏𝗏𝗏 made one last attempt to stave off oblivion. 𝗏𝗏𝗏 bent the raw energies of the universe to his will, weaving a protective shroud around each of the Pantheon Titan spirits and launching them into the great dark. While the Titans' disembodied souls hurtled through the cosmos, Sargeras' fell storm obliterated what remained of their physical forms. Unaware that the Titan spirits had survived, Sargeras declared the Burning Legion victorious. The Pantheon was no more, and now he had tantalizing clues about a powerful world soul called Azeroth. Yet though Sargeras had learned the name of this nascent titan, its whereabouts remained a mystery. Nonetheless, without the Pantheon to oppose him, he knew he would find the world soul in time. And he knew he would have to do so before the Void Lords did. In our next video, whenever that may be, we will start here at the Burning Crusade. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy this series. I know that my voice can be a little warbly sometimes, as is natural when you're reading out loud for over an hour at a time. So please let me know in the comments if you like this video, and we'll continue here next time at the Burning Crusade.